Good afternoon, and thank you, Subhash, for the introduction. The way I'm going to run through this session is I will spend about 40 minutes, out of which about 20 minutes I'm giving you an overview of NSQF framework, and another 20 minutes on one of the implementations which have been done, mechanisms which have been created at the school level within the state governments, in multiple state governments, by Government of India and along with about 12-13 different state governments. I would share that with you as a case study example to illustrate what's happening at the ground level, and then we would have about 20 minutes of Q&A. But in the meantime, if you have some queries or clarificatory questions which keep on coming to your mind, you can type it on your boards, and wherever possible I'll include that while I'm running through the presentation today, and then we'll go on to the Q&A. Questions come in. So let's get going. There are three parts. I've already told you that we would look at NSQF overview, vocational education schools, and Q&A. As Subhash told you, NSQF document was released in December 2013, and it replaced the then existing document called NVEQF of the Ministry of HRD. The key features of NSQF are, one is it's a unified Indian qualification framework for skills, and it's based on different levels of competencies of knowledge, skills, and aptitude. It is outcome and competency based framework. So unlike the traditional method where the learning is defined by number of hours one spends in the classroom, here the certification and assessment is done, evaluation is done at the end based on whether the trainer or learner has achieved the competencies which were stipulated for a particular job role. So it recognizes learning outcomes, 10 levels of competency. So the competency levels have been broken down into 10 specific levels, and we'll spend a little more time on that later. I have a couple of slides on that. And each level of competency is defined by level descriptors. So you have level descriptors from L1, level 1, which is the lowest level, to level 10, which is the highest level. And where does one job fit in at what level is defined by the level descriptors, and I'll give you some examples of that as we move forward today. And NSQF document envisages multiple entry and exit points in our whole skilling ecosystem. It specifically focuses on industry inputs in developing qualifications, the national occupation standards, in evaluations and certifications through the sector skill councils which have been formed. It also provides for recognition of learning which people have gone through non-formal or informal channels of education or training, out of school, out of college. For example, the typical Guru Chela system where there's a expert AC mechanic with a small pappu with him who carries a bag and for first 1 or 2 years gives him all the tools, etc., which are needed, and keeps on observing, and then starts helping him, and then actually becomes kind of an expert over 2 or 3 years, and then becomes his own good master and hires another pappu. So, and the cycle goes on. We are very well familiar with that in almost most of the normal trades of electrician, plumber, and so on and so forth. So how can those guys be assessed, evaluated, and certified for the learnings which they have? That's called RPL. And a lifelong learning, because the multiple career people will have to go through multiple careers in their 45 years of working life. So one could look at changing the career, looking at picking up new job roles which are required in the next few years as existing job roles. Some of them will keep on becoming obsolete as we move down. Some of the key pillars of implementing the framework, I'll not go into details here, because if I have to take a detailed session on NSQF, it would need at least about 6 to 8 hours to really go into the details. The idea was here to give you a little overview of what NSQF is, and then you could go through the NSQF document, which is available on the NSDA site, NSDC site, and so it's an outcome-based learning framework, and it looks at multi-stakeholder engagement. For example, the state and central governments, sector skill councils. I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with the sector skill councils. Just a brief 2 or 3 liner. National Skill Development Corporation has been creating over the last 4 years sector skill councils in specific sectors like hospitality, health, automobile, capital goods, leather, agriculture, tourism, and so on and so forth, beauty and wellness. And these councils are created through NSDC, through a framework NSDC has created by large and medium-sized employers. They come together to form a sector skill council. So basically they are industry representative bodies which work closely with NSDC on one side and the training providers, and on the other side represent industry and set occupational standards, the assessment, evaluation and certification standards for their sector using NSQF framework. And various education boards and universities, they would also be involved, as would be many of the training providers. There are about 170, 175 training providers of NSDC partners and even others. And in between you would see 6 pillars. So there's a convergence which one is looking at, whether it's in terms of standards, curriculum design, training, assessment, the assessment methodology, the certification. It's a bottoms-up labor market information is envisaged in NSQF. So there's a skill gap studies one needs to do, which NSDC has done 2 rounds of that, one about 5 years ago, and then district-wise skill gap studies they have just completed for every state. I think Bihar is the only one which is in the final stages. So that all the planning for skilling is done by the training providers based on the district. They take that into consideration. Industry endorsed qualification packs and national occupation standards. I will spend a little more time. There are a couple of slides on that I would share. Training and capacity building mechanisms, whether it's within the formal system of education, embedding, and I'll share one case study with you, or within the so-called non-formal, which is in the training industry across different sectors. Quality assurance through the way the curriculum is created, meeting the occupational standards, the way the evaluation is done, and recognition across all levels as a single standard for skills-based education training in the country. So that's what the whole NSQF is based upon. There are 4 or 5 key definitions. There are many definitions given in the NSQF document. I would look at 5 of them which I thought would be useful. So one is the word qualification, which is mentioned in NSQF, which is a formal outcome of assessment and validation process by a competent body which determines that individual has achieved the learning outcomes to given standards. So this is really, in your English terms, we are saying a body which evaluates the learning a student has gone through, a learner, and says that the student has acquired the competencies needed for that specific job role as per the occupational standard. And these competent bodies, the sector skill councils are setting up their assessment network, their ecosystem of assessors who would be doing that on behalf of each of the sector skill councils. And once a student clears a certain evaluation for a specific job role, they would get a certificate. So that's the qualification they would have for that job role. And competence is really a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes which are needed for that particular job role. So essentially, ability to do a particular job well, and and it's defined in outcome terms. The third is recognition of prior learning, which I already discussed with you. National occupational standards are again output driven standards for knowledge which the person needs to know, things which they need to do, able to do, and in terms of softer skills of attitudes which are required for that particular job. And they have been fine-tuned to uniquely to Indian context. That's why we call it the National Occupational Standard. So when you put the unique Indian context to it, the occupational standard becomes the National Occupational Standard. And Qualification Pack is another term which would be useful for everyone to know. It's a set of noses for a job role. So, and we'll look at one slide which explains this in a little more detail. So as I told you earlier, there are 10 levels in NSQF, or 10 competency levels which have been defined under NSQF, and each level represents. Let me see the questions. I need the question box. Just a minute. So they represent. Each level represents certain kind of learning outcomes, and these are generic learning outcomes which are not which are subject and sector neutral in the overall NSQF framework. There is a question from couple of questions. One are from Divesh Sabu about bottoms up labor market information. What will be the structure of the same? So I would discuss that, and how to register with sector skill councils is a question from Mr. Jawaharlal Jindal. So probably I'll take that up in the question answer session, both the questions. So each level is defined by a set of five items, and for each of those 5 items there are descriptions which is given, a criteria which is given, and whichever job role fits in best with the set of criteria, those level descriptors, that job role is set to be pegged to that particular NSQF level. And one more thing, there's a huge amount of confusion in the country about NSQF levels. If you have done NSQF level 7, that means you are a graduate. If you have got NSQF level 6 or NSQF level 5, you are a diploma holder. This is absolutely wrong to say that NSQF level 7 means I've got a graduation. It's equivalent to a graduation. And that's a wrong understanding. Of course, there would be some amount of kind of equivalences created, not from an academic perspective of saying that if I've got one job role, I've got certified at which is at level 7, then I'm equal to graduate or a bachelor's degree. So that's something, it's really not directly related to the years of study in our formal system of education. So let's look at these 10 levels. You'll see on the top row, first row, the row header, there are 5 specific criteria which have been created. What is the process? What is the professional knowledge required? What is the professional skill, core skill, and responsibility? And I've given 2 samples, one for level 1 and one for level 4. But this whole table is provided for in the NSQF document. And you could see that in level 1, if I read the responsibility column, it says no responsibility always works under continuous instruction and close supervision. And if I read professional skill, it says routine and repetitive takes safety and security measures. And if I read the process required, it says prepares person to carry out processes that are repetitive, on regular basis, require no previous practice. So I would encourage you in the next 5 seconds to think through one or two job roles which fulfill this kind of criteria which is mentioned in level 1. So these are job roles which are basically, one says, are unskilled labor, who are doing, for example, person who picks up bricks and puts it in some place in a certain manner and keeps on doing it from morning till evening in a very, very repetitive manner under close supervision, very, very standard process, may take few hours to train that person in. That would be at a level 1, so it's primarily an unskilled worker with certain amount of training given for a few hours. If you look at level 4, it says responsibility for own work and learning. And process required is works in familiar, predictable, routine situation of clear choice, needs certain factual knowledge in the field, can recall and demonstrate practical skill, routine, repetitive in narrow range of application using appropriate rule and tools, using quality concepts, needs to be able to communicate, written or oral, basic arithmetic, algebraic principles, so basic numeracy skills are needed, certain social skills are needed. So that's how the levels go in, and a particular job gets pegged at a level wherever there's a best fitment. So let me just at this stage answer a few questions. How to get registered with sector skill councils, which Johar has asked, Mr. Johar. So I am not very sure for what purpose are you looking at registering for SSCs. The context is not clear. If you are a vocational training provider, there are certain things for which you can get registered with that particular sector skill councils. And you can go to each sector skill council has a website, and you could go to those websites and figure out the mechanism. The bottoms up labor market information system, what would be the structure? I have no idea, Devesh. The only thing which is available right now is the district level skill gap studies, which are already available, and they are available on the website of any National Skill Development Organization. Their URL is nsdcindia.org, but these are static studies. It's not that they are not dynamic studies, right? In the sense, it will not be updated every 6 months. That will probably get updated every 2 years. Okay. And there's a question from Mr. Ramaswamy Srinivasan. What are the niche skills identified for electronics and communication graduates? Now, there are multiple job roles for which NOSes and qualification packs have been created by Electronics Sector Skill Council. And if you go to their website, you would be able to, or the NSDC website, you'll be able to access and see all the job roles which they've created and the qualification packs and their occupational standards. And if you want to register, Mr. Johar, for your vocational training as a vocational training provider, NSDC has a well-defined process which has been laid out. It's available on the website as to if you have to become the NSDC training partner. What is the process for doing that? That's available in a very, very transparent manner on the NSDC website. So there are some comments coming from Mr. Krishan Kalra that responsibility levels are split too thin. So I'm not going to really comment on that right now. How a student gets knowledge of level 5 to level 10 after school, Mr. Ved Prakash Gupta, I'll address that partially. NSQF syllabus and Sector Skill Council syllabus are different, says Muhammad Marzouk, or it's a question. So NSQF, you need to understand, is not a syllabus. NSQF is a framework. Okay, and NSQF doesn't create a syllabus. It doesn't define a syllabus. NSQF defines 10 levels of competencies. Now, sector skill councils are supposed to create occupational standards which they're creating for each specific job role. And from those occupational standards or NOSes, the syllabus gets made for that job role. And each sector skill council will create job roles, the occupational standards for their sectors, for their respective sectors. So I hope that query is clear. So NSQF is neither a syllabus nor a scheme. It's a framework. It's a qualification framework which has been created by Government of India. So if we look at qualification pack, one qualification pack would be for one job role. And a qualification pack would consist of multiple NOSes, multiple national occupational standards. So qualification pack for one job role is a combination of, is a set of probably 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 NOSes, and each, so if you look at the qualification pack, I've just taken a little summary of a qualification pack for one job role from the Security Sector Skill Council, so that you have become a little more familiar with what is a qualification pack, and then you can access and understand that, and after downloading some qualification packs from the NSDC or the Sector Skill Council website. So this says job role is CCTV supervisor. So that's a job role, closed circuit TV supervisor. This job role is pegged at level 5. It's for class 12 student. Minimum qualification mentioned is class 12. So ideally what Sector Skill Council is saying, to be a CCTV supervisor, you should ideally be class 12 pass. There is no maximum educational qualification prescribed. There are some job roles which prescribe that, and that really means that if someone is above that educational qualification, they would be grossly underemployed in this particular job role. So that's what it says, but these are not mandatory, these are recommendatory kind of stuff. And this qualification pack has 9 NOSes. So you'll be able to understand the relationship between qualification pack and NOS. It says how to monitor a security unit, supervise CCTV operations to secure the premises, so maintain operational performance of the system, observe health and safety while monitoring the security operations, security tasks, and so on and so forth. So for each of these NOSes, there are detailed occupational standards given across 3 dimensions. So each NOS would have occupational standards for knowledge, which the person needs to know, skill, performance criteria, which the person needs to be able to do, and soft skills. So each NOS would be a combination of these 3 and combination of relevant NOSes. So each NOS is like a major task. And I'm sure some of you would have figured out that same NOS could also be there in multiple qualification packs. It may appear. For example, here, if we look at the NOS number 4, observe health and safety while monitoring security operations. This may also be a valid NOS for an armed security guard, for example. So NOS could appear in, same NOS may appear in multiple qualification packs. So let me see if there's some questions which I need to answer at this stage. Ashwini says, good afternoon. So good afternoon, Ashwini. Isn't the concept of 10 levels particularly as see this, how does it move down? So is there any train the trainer program organized by NSQF on the occupational skills? Now again I want to clarify this because I'm spending time on this because I've heard this many times. Now NSQF is not an organization, it's not an institution, it's not a body, it's a framework. So NSQF does not organize any training program. So if the train the trainer program to be organized, Sector Skill Council, some of them have got equipped to do the train the trainer programs. So for that particular sector, for whichever job role you want to do the train the trainer, you need to approach the respective Sector Skill Council. So NSQF is a framework. It's a set of few pages which have been written as a framework for national skills qualification. So it's not a person, not an institution, not a organization. And there's another question, which is a competent body for assessment of qualifications for NSQF level. So finally, the evaluations would be done by the assessment bodies, which would be accredited by the respective sector skill councils, and they've already been started doing that over the last more than 13-14 months. So there's certain implementation schedule of NSQF. So let's look at what needs to be done on 27th December 2016 as the second deadline. Government funding would be available only for NSQF compliant courses. For all government funding, this is for central government. For all government funding, and educational institutions, admission eligibility criteria in various courses would be in terms of NSQF level. That's what the document says. Now, how that would happen is something which is yet not clear, either to me or probably to most of the people, even at a policy level. So those implementation structures have to be created as we move through. Government of India and central government PSUs will define their recruitment criteria for all positions in terms of NSQF level. Now, this is a major issue, major mandate of the NSQF document. And Mr. Rudy has already started speaking about it. You would have heard him on 1st April is the first time I heard him talk about this and starting to flag off this issue. State governments and the PSUs should be encouraged to amend the recruitment rules. After the 5th anniversary, that is 27 December 2018, it will be mandatory for all training educational programs to be NSQF compliant. And what would this mean? Document is silent on it. Probably those structures would have to be evolved and then get created with time. All training and educational institutions shall define eligibility criteria for admissions to various courses in terms of NSQF levels. So that's what is mandated in the NSQF document. Now there are certain questions. Let me just see. Mr. Krishan Kalra is saying whose work the guy will. I can't understand that question. It's looking incomplete. For example, level 2 to 10, as far as responsibility is concerned, will only increase the number of persons whose government the guy will supervise. I'm sorry, Mr. Krishan, I'm not able to understand the question. What is the eligibility criteria for all positions in terms of levels? So what the document says is the minimum eligibility criteria to apply for government jobs for the central government and the central government PSUs. When the recruitment ads come in, they would have the recruitment criteria in terms of NSQF levels. That's what it really means. So that's a little overview of NSQF, but there's a lot more details available in the NSQF document, which is available on the website of either National Skill Development Agency, which is apex body, and that body actually anchors the NSQF document and is responsible for the NSQF document as the owner of the NSQF document. And you could go through that document in detail, and if you have any questions on that, you could always shoot off your questions through email to Mr. Subhash Sapru in CII and could get answered, or you could email it to me as well. I'll give you my email address at the end. Vocational education schools. This is one of the programs which Government of India started, MHRD, about 3.5 years ago when they revised the vocational centralized scheme on vocational education. So if you look at the schematic, Mr. Krishan Kalra, your question is on how will the responsibility change from level 3 onwards, except supervising the number of persons and they're being answerable for the work. So whatever is written in the document is what is written in terms of the responsibility pegged at each of the levels. So I don't have information beyond that. So if you look at the schematic here, government Ministry of HRD has introduced since April 2012 vocational education in government schools, and which could also go into the private schools where government is funding the government schools through the state governments from class 9 to class 12. So typically what has happened is that a specific job role has been chosen, which would be at a level 4. From making it amenable to be taught in the schools and fit that into the school structure of education, that job role has been divided into 4 parts, syllabus created, and student does that across 4 years from 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th as one of the subjects, like they study physics, chemistry, English, Hindi, mathematics, geography, history. They do one of these vocational subjects, and I'll share more details about this. The second thing which government has done is, and this is the Higher Education Department and UGC and AICTE, they have introduced a community college program in the higher education system. About 300 plus colleges have already been funded by UGC, and most of them are operational. They are hosted in the existing colleges. There's a BWOC program of another 125 colleges which were funded last year by UGC. So these are all pilot projects which are going on. And the way it happens in year one of the community college program, at least one of the job roles needs to be at a level 5. And please relate this statement of mine to what I had said earlier, that NSQF level does not mean years of study, or whether it's equivalent to first year, second year, third year, fourth year, or BSc or MSc and so on and so forth. But from a certain amount of equivalence across the country point of view, what UGC has done is, in year one, that is the diploma of the community college program, at least one of the job roles needs to be at level 5. Others could be at level 3, 4 also. Similarly, at year 2, at least one job role needs to be at a level 6. And in year 3, at least one job role needs to be at level 7. So that there's a certain amount of pegging which is done. And they follow the normal credit system which is there, which is prescribed in detail in the community college scheme or the BWOC scheme of UGC. And in each of the years, they could do multiple job roles. But I would spend more time in the school framework now, where the focus is to improve, link education to employability, make education relevant, and preparing students for the world of work, and introducing really them to the world of work. So that's the overarching goal of this program. And while about 13-14 states have already started implementing this since last year, I mean over the last 3 years, I would share with you some of the work which is where Wadhwani Foundation has been partnering the state governments as case studies, and I'll pick up the first 2 states only just to illustrate what has happened in the journey. The first pilot state which worked for the national level project was in Haryana, which started with 40 schools and about 4,000 students in 2012. Today there are 240 schools which offer vocational education across the state, with about 30,000 plus students enrolled for the vocational subject, who have taken up vocational subject as one of the subjects in the class 9 to 12. And there are 7 different subjects in which are being provided in the state, like retail sales assistant, unarmed security guard, patient care assistant, assistant beautician, and so on and so forth, automotive technician. In the new academic year, which is 15-16, another 250 schools will commence vocational education in the schools in 9 to 12, and 3 more subjects are being introduced, one from media entertainment, one from tourism sector, and there's one more, I forget which one. Similarly, in Himachal Pradesh, it started with 100 schools in 2013. Today, they have 200 schools, about 25,000 students, and 5 vocational courses across these schools. And in the new academic year 15-16, they are going to add another 300 schools, so that it will become 500 schools and 2 more courses being added. Similarly, other states, I've put some numbers, so I'm not going to go through all of them. In addition to these 5, there are many other states which have started this, like Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Sikkim, West Bengal, and this is not a complete list, it's a partial list. So one of the things which happens in the school, and these are real life photographs, is the student mobilization, where student counseling, the parental counseling is done by the school as to what are the benefits and pros and cons of taking the vocational education in schools. And there's a question which has come in from Mr. Devesh Sabu. What is the rationale behind deciding which courses are to be offered? Is it based on the district-wise skill gap studies? Yes, there is a correlation between the skill gap requirements and the courses, and that's the ideal state to really look at when we plan for it. One is within the state, within the district, and in a certain school. So that's the clear direction which is getting followed in terms of choosing the sectors and so on and so forth. Mr. Krishan Kalra is saying, kindly repeat the state partners' name. So I'll just put that slide again. So there's Karnataka, Himachal, Rajasthan, which have already started. Uttarakhand will start this year. Jharkhand will start this year. these are 5 states we are currently working with and supporting as a foundation. Other states which have also started last year are Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Sikkim, West Bengal, and few other states have started this. There's another question from Mr. Karthik asking whether BVOC degree will be eligible for admission to non-vocational master's program. I cannot give you a yes and no answer, but my dream and vision is yes, they should be eligible, provided there are certain academic related stuff which they are able to follow through. So there's a concept of academic deficiency, so and doing bridge courses to overcome that. But at a principal level, I am in favor of providing admissions to the master's level for them. Now again, coming NSQF document does not prescribe that, but it gives that as a clear conceptual direction that there should be a vertical mobility, and the implementation structures have yet to evolve, and over the period of time it would evolve, I'm quite sure. Mr. Johardal is asking which courses we should start in Haryana. Mr. Johardal, you could send me an email, and I would be pleased to tell you what courses are already there in the schools right now, the 10 courses in the Haryana school, which I can share with you. And you could go through the skill gap report of NSDC as well. So the curriculum and content in the school, in the case of school, the curriculum is based on a certain job role and developed based on the occupational standards for that job role. The nodal agency for the curriculum in the case of schools, which MHRD has mandated, is there's a unit of NCERT based in Bhopal, which is called PSS, Central Institute of Vocational Education. They are the nodal agency for providing content, and this content is, the soft copies of this are free of cost for any school. They can download, no royalty to be paid for NCERT for these particular courses. They are available on their website of PSSCIVE. You can Google and find them. Of course, the sector skill councils are validating those content. The CBSE, we have been involved in a couple of content development in the past. And typically in the schools, the books are printed by the respective Directorate of School Education given to the students. Mr. Ramamurthy is asking, is there any incentives to students during the study period? In the schools, no, there is no incentive to the student. Of course, they get this book free of cost. So it's like any of the regular subjects. And there's some question on space. Yeah, so one needs to set up small workshops in the school for each subject. They need to have classrooms. So the schools are also selected based on the current infrastructure and future infrastructure expected, and under the RAMSA scheme, RMSA scheme of MHRD, states do get funds for creating additional civil infrastructure. So teachers are primarily selected from most of the states through the training partners of NSDC. I mentioned to you there are about 170 training partners. Each one of them have a set of specialized sectors they work with, and some are all India, pan India, some are regional, some are strong at a state level. So there is a selection process they go through, which is kind of for each state government designs that selection process in partnership, in consultation with the NSDC, with the foundation, and whosoever the program partners. And the vocational training partners are selected, and they provide trainers whose qualifications, etc., are already created for each sector through the PSSCIVE. And so the teachers are sourced from there, so they do come with industry experience. They get trained quite extensively over a period of time by the respective VTPs, by the state government, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole training framework which has got created, and each state has adapted that. So you can see one of the pictures. This is an actual picture of the training being done for school teachers in Haryana in their SCRT in Gurgaon. There's a principal orientation which is done more than once in a year. District education officers also need to be completely briefed because they are the like CEOs in the district for all the government schools. And the trainers come from industry, from the sector skill councils, from the VTPs, Wadhwani Foundation, PSSCIV, and so on and so forth. PSSCIV also plays a part. They have been playing a major part in terms of pedagogical training for the teachers. Since it's a competency-based training, competency-based assessment, so that's a major mindset and orientation which needs to be brought in among the teachers. The labs and workshops, showing you one of the pictures, little older picture, about a year-old picture of a retail lab in one of the schools, of some security lab. There are regular industry interactions. So curriculum is designed through industry defined occupation standards. Faculty has industry orientation. There are guest lecturers who are brought in. So you can see probably this is a security class going on. One of the police guys seems to have been brought in here. There are regular industry visits. There are funds for that which are given by MHRD for taking students out for industry visits. And for 11th, 12th standards, there's a mandatory few days of internship so that they get valuable exposure to industry, which we, in our experience, has been very, very useful, this industry interaction. So it doesn't become a theory paper, but there's a lot of hands-on exposure to the students, both inside the school and outside the school. Regular monitoring and evaluation gets done. At least in the states we are partnering in, we have been ensuring that this is a regular feature of the program through the state secretary, the director of school education department. There is a question which is from Mr. Divesh. Can NSGC partners also run vocational training programs in schools, or is it only through MHRD? So Divesh, Mr. Divesh, MHRD only provides funds to the schools. So how the partners have to be chosen, how teachers have to be selected is left to the state government. So state government, most of the state government, in fact all of them, have partnered, have selected specific training partners of NSGC who help in the delivery of the classes in the schools. So that's the process. So for the first time in the school's history, placement camps have been organized, and these are the camps which were organized last year in Haryana. Students who want to take up placement after 12th standard and do not want to go into the higher education system, the sector skill councils, NSGC is helping schools in the state to connect the schools and students with the potential employers in the district. And if you recall, there are regular guest lectures, there are industry visits. So even during that time, the employers become well aware about, the local employers, well aware about what's happening in the school, and they do come to the schools. They look forward to employment. And probably from next year onwards, the larger number of students, at least from Himachal, Haryana, will start graduating from 12th standard and would be who want to take up a job would be available for employment. So some of the partners which are working, MHRD, which is the funding agency, funding department, industry-driven skill standards through National Skill Development Corporation and sector skill councils. Teachers I've already discussed. Curriculum courseware through PSSCIV. Implementation responsibilities of the state government, Directorate of School Education, and the Ramsa department. The evaluation is done, overall responsibility is that of the school board. So there's a separate scheme which has been created for evaluation of the vocational subject, where there's a larger percentage for the practicals, and that practical assessment is done by sector skill councils assessors. So that's another change which has been brought in here for this course. And placement I have discussed, and we have found it very useful if the states do get regular support through a program management agency or organization. So we have been playing that role in 5 states now, and very soon jointly with NSDC and the Skills Ministry, a joint team will provide support across all the schools starting maybe in another month or 2. Now, some of the key success factors for schools is very good student mobilization. Of course, here we don't have to get students from outside. Unlike the private training partners, students are already there in the school in 8th standard or moving to 9th. But they have to be counseled which subject to take, whether they should take a vocational subject or not. The scheme of studies of the school education board has to be altered so that they incorporate vocational education in the appropriate place in the scheme of studies of the education board. So that's a very, very important step. Curriculum and content, teachers recruitment and continued training is a very important success factor. It's extremely important that principals and district education officers are oriented properly and especially they are engaged in the making successful intervention, especially in the first 2 or 3 years. Labs and workshops in schools, industry collaboration, which we discussed, guest lectures, industry visits, internships, placements, assessment, the skill component assessed on occupational standards by the industry through the sector skill council. Monitoring and evaluation at a periodic basis is again very, very important in the infant stages of this scheme. When I say infant stages, the first 3 or 4 years. Most of the states where the numbers have started going beyond 100 are clear. Recommendation is for the state government to have a separate NSQF cell in the school education directorate, which some of the states have created, including Haryana, Himachal, and a vertical mobility to higher education, which currently a structure has got created, needs to evolve over the next 2 or 3 years. So the structure of community colleges, BVOC program, that framework has been put in by place by UGC and MHRD. So idea of giving this example was to show how the NSQF framework is being integrated into the formal education system at the school level and giving a little bit overview of what's happening at the higher education level as we move ahead. And again, reminding you that NSQF is really does not define all the implementation structures. It defines the overarching framework, and the implementation structures, different implementing agencies under the guidance of the Skills Ministry, the National Skill Development Corporation, the National Skill Development Agency needs to create. And some of the other key players would be the sector skill councils, the universities, the school education boards, the NCVT, the SCVT, State Council of Vocational Training, the National Council of Vocational Training. And the good news is now ITIs have come under the administrative control of the Skills Ministry, and all the ministries are working now in unison to bring in and integrate NSQF into the training programs, whether it's a rural development, urban development, and so on and so forth. So that's a brief I wanted to give you. Okay, there's one more slide, sorry. So some of the areas for industry institute linkages as far as schools are concerned is guest lectures, industry visits, training of faculty, augmenting the workshop and lab facilities. Some of the local employers can do that. Internships, recruitment of skilled people. And I would really encourage those of you who are from the from employing organizations in this webinar to really look at this, to contribute your own whatever you could do to this whole movement of vocationalization in schools to make it successful, so that you get better talent for your organizations. So I would move into the Q&A session now. Some questions I've already been answering. You can type in your questions, and I would take up the questions. We have about 7-8 minutes for a few more questions, so I would be glad to answer some more questions from you. So I'm waiting for some of you or many of you to punch in your questions so that I could take that up. In the meanwhile, there are two questions which had gone unanswered earlier. One is from Mr. Jasjeet Singh Ahluwalia. Given the national skills framework is getting consolidated under a single ministry, how will the recognition of assessing bodies work under sector skill councils and NCVT? So I think now with the whole ITI system coming under the skills ministry, between NSDC and NCVT, that those frameworks would definitely evolve uh, over the next few months. So I'm sure bigger integration would happen over the next 12 months, and in terms of curriculum, in terms of assessment, evaluation, certification. But I would not have any specific answers at this point of time. Is there any other question which have been asked so far which I have kind of not responded? So I await questions from your side, and okay, there's a question from Mr. Devesh Sabu again. Do the teacher training sessions as part of school vocation training programs generally happen at the state capitals only? As of now, the number of schools were less, so they were happening primarily not at the state capital. For example, in the case of Haryana, it was in Gurgaon, primarily because they have a large infrastructure in SCRT there. Similarly, in Himachal, it used to happen it has been happening more at Solan, where they have an physical infrastructure. So it's really what is more practical. That's what the state government decides. Mr. Jasjeet is saying we see that RPL has started a pilot in construction sector. Yes, you're right. And so has Security Sector Skill Council come out with pretty detailed guidelines for RPL, which you could download from their website. Then there's a comment, it's not a question, from Mr. Narayanan that aviation sector courses, they're planning for some courses in aviation sector. Yes, that would be very good for India. How about sectors other than construction under DGIT? I believe this is being funded by LWB. I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand this question. Mr. Ashwini is asking, is there a provision wherein we can send our students for a workshop? So Ashwini, could specify what kind of a workshop you're looking for. I really, then I would be able to answer that question properly. Based on interactions with the current government, how is skilling being viewed? Do they want it to be state funded, or do they want the private sector to take the lead? I mean, I have been following some of the statements of what Mr. Rudy has been making in the public domain, and as well as in some of the conferences, seminars, or one-to-one sessions. And I think this would be a combination. Clearly, government, both central and state together, would not be able to do this. Would not have enough funds to really get into the skilling completely. So industry would have to come forward for doing this as well and partner with the government. Mr. Ramurthy is asking, is there any limitation of a strength per course? In the context of schools, yes. For each subject in a class, there's a batch, or there's a maximum strength of 25 students. Mr. Krishan Kalra is saying, thanks Ajay, very nice presentation, demystifies a lot. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishan Kalra, for your compliments. We have another couple of minutes. I would be glad to take in one or two more questions from you. Could you please share where we can get the guidelines for RPL? So Devesh, if you log into the website of Security Sector Skill Council, just Google it, you would be able to get through the RPL guidelines which have been created by the Sector Skill Council, Security Sector Skill Council. That will give you an illustration of how the RPL thing is happening, and a lot of intensive work, I believe, had gone into that by the Sector Skill Council, Security Sector Skill Council, and NSDC. So it will be very useful for you to go through that, and for others also to understand RPL. For me, it was a good learning experience, because I am also not an expert on RPL. We are all in a learning mode and learning from each other. So if there are no further questions, we are almost at 4 o'clock now, and I would like to close this session and say thank you to all of you for asking so many questions and making at least that gives me feedback as to what are the kind of issues and questions in your queries in your mind, and becomes very useful for our interaction also in giving feedback to the relevant agencies, including NSDC and Skills Ministry, and fine-tuning my session for the future webinars, and of course to keep me awake and everyone else awake during the session. There's one last question from Mr. Divesh. How can we make skills aspirational? It's not an easy task, Divesh, but this is something which is extremely important. So there are multiple things which need to be done, and I can give you some examples of where skills have become aspirational. The IT skills were made aspirational by NIIT, the company I worked with for 24 years in early 80s, mid 80s, by providing air-conditioned classrooms, good jobs. Similarly, if you look at beauty and wellness sector, they seem to be packaging it very well. So one is an issue of packaging and nomenclature. Second is the kind of salaries that the employers are willing to give. So to make skills aspirational, it's important that industry recognizes the skills and the certification of skills and gives them, such candidates, a higher differential salary than uncertified candidates. I think that will go a long way. The third is for each and every individual. I think I would go back to that Indian philosophy. The change begins with us only, and I would encourage each one of you to look at how do we, each one of us treats the plumber who comes to our house, the electrician who comes to our house, the gardener who comes to our house, our driver. Have you ever asked the electrician to take a sofa while we are giving him the payment or talking to him? I think that those are things which will start, it may look very trivial that can that make a change, but once a critical mass of people start doing that, I think that will also have an additional, much additional social pull. And finally, one benchmark for skills being aspirational, and this is something which in NIT definitely, when first time we saw matrimonial ads, and Mr. Vijay Thadani, the CEO of NIT, saw those ads saying groom or bride is GNIIT, and we thought that we have arrived. So if someone could say, someone who has done an NSQF level 7 course in the electronic sector, I think the skills would have arrived that day. So matrimonial ads are a big benchmark, but making them aspirational is really, one is a societal responsibility, and second is really the responsibility of industry to give higher credits from salary perspective to certified students. And of course, the whole recruitment mandate which NSQF has put in will, I think, would create a major pull to make skills aspirational if the government plays its cards right in this and designs appropriate mechanisms. Okay, so thank you so much, and let's call this session to a cloose. Okay, I promised to give my email ID. It is, I'll give you the shorter one, Ajay M. Goel, AJAY, M for Mohan, G for Goa, O for Orange, E for England, L for London, ajmgoel@gmail.com. My official ID is a little longer, so I thought I'll just give you my shorter Gmail ID, or you can send an email to CII to Mr. Subhash Sapru. Okay.